Have you ever observed how certain individuals seem to possess an almost otherworldly influence over the atmosphere around them? They don't yell, they don't plead, and without uttering a single word, they simply pull back and everything begins to shift. The energy alters. People begin to wonder, to pursue, to feel the absence. Now picture yourself doing the same. What if you didn't react instantly to everything? What if, instead of responding on autopilot, you chose silence, chose to pull away rather than erupt? What do you think would unfold? That's exactly where the essence lies. When you're no longer constantly accessible, mentally, emotionally, physically, the world around you begins to unravel. People panic because they've grown used to having power over you by manipulating your reactions, your impulses, your consistency. But the moment you decide to step back, the entire dynamic shifts, and those who once believed they had you figured out come to the startling realization that they never truly did. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Now consider this. When you suddenly become unavailable, who is it that starts to panic? Who begins to feel irritated? Who tries to provoke a reaction from you, just to pull an emotion out? That response says far more about them than it ever does about you. And most importantly, it shows just how much you're still being controlled, often without even knowing it. You keep showing up, giving yourself away, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to hold on to people who deep down were probably never truly there for you to begin with. And with every automatic yes, every quick reply, every emotional outburst, you're handing over small pieces of your own energy. So what are you left with by the end of it all? Exhaustion, frustration, a hollow feeling that you can't quite explain. And here's the reason. You're far too available to those who haven't earned even a second of your silence. This video isn't about abandoning the world. It's about choosing you. It's about stepping into what Carl Jung referred to as individuation, the journey of becoming whole, real, and fully yourself. And that journey begins the moment you realize that silence can carry more weight than 1,000 arguments. That stepping back, when it's done from awareness rather than avoidance, is actually a declaration of strength. So let me ask you this. How much longer will you let yourself be ruled by the emotions of others? How much longer will you react like a puppet every time someone presses on an old wound? Maybe now is the moment to cut those strings, to retreat, to become something unreadable, untouchable, a mystery. Because the second you stop being constantly accessible, everything begins to shift. You were raised to always be present, to reply without delay, to please, to say yes even when your soul screamed no. From a young age, the message was clear. Your value lies in how accessible you are to everyone else. But let's expose a truth that's rarely spoken so plainly. Being endlessly available is not a virtue. It is a form of self-betrayal. It is not kindness. It's captivity. And as long as you continue to equate constant presence with love or worth, you'll keep getting drained, used, and then quietly discarded the moment your usefulness fades. Why? Because always being there for others turns you into something expected, predictable, and in human psychology, what becomes predictable often becomes utilitarian, a tool, an emotional vending machine. People press a button when they need relief, validation, attention, and just like that, you respond. Then they shelve you again until the next time. But here's the harder truth. You don't see it. You don't notice because you've bought into an illusion. You've convinced yourself that if you're always there for others, someone will finally be there for you. But reality doesn't work that way. It never did. Carl Jung described the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, admired, included. That mask, it's the very thing that makes you overextend yourself. It forces you to show up even when you're breaking down. You say, "It's fine," when you're suffocating inside. You instantly reply to texts despite being exhausted. You over-explain, defend, and justify your existence, as if your presence needs to be earned every second. But what happens the more you live on other stages? You vanish from your own. Being constantly reachable isn't just exhausting. It's a subtle but dangerous form of self-abandonment. It's disguised approval-seeking. It's a survival strategy. You learn to avoid rejection. But what you gain in perceived acceptance, you lose tenfold in inner peace. Your energy, finite, sacred, is being bled out as though it's infinite, and it isn't. It never was. Here's something to sit with. The people who insist you stay available at all times don't truly want you. They crave what you give: emotional safety, validation, company, distraction. The moment you start setting limits, even gently, those same people may resist, criticize, or accuse you of being selfish or different. But their frustration isn't about your change. It's about losing access to a function you once fulfilled. The cruel paradox is this: the more available you are, the less others value you. What is too easy to reach becomes emotionally disposable. No one treasures what is handed to them without effort. No one respects what they didn't have to earn. So pause, reflect. Who has truly earned your attention? Who respects your time, your energy, your emotional presence? Or maybe a more important question: who has earned your absence? But before answering that, we need to unravel something deeper. Why do we keep responding? Why do we cave so easily? What is behind this reflex to please, justify, and perform emotional labor for others? Carl Jung offers insight. He spoke not of behavior in isolation, but of psychic energy, a concept describing our inner life force. According to Jung, every thought, every reaction, every emotional response uses up energy from a finite reserve. So the real question is this: are you choosing where your energy flows, or have you surrendered that control to the world? Carl Jung said, he spoke not of behavior in isolation, but of psychic energy, a concept describing our inner life force. According to Jung, every thought, every reaction, every emotional response uses up energy from a finite reserve. So, the real question is this: are you choosing where your energy flows, or have you surrendered that control to the world? Every impulsive reaction, every effort to fix, to defend, to explain, you're hemorrhaging psychic energy. You argue with someone who never deserved your explanation. You rush to reply to people who don't value your presence. You try to rescue those who never asked how you're doing, and slowly you unravel. Jung reminded us that which you resist not only persists, it dominates you. The more you react, the more entangled you become in the web of emotional traps spun by others, because reacting constantly, unthinkingly, is a leak in your energetic system, and over time that leak turns into emotional burnout. Let's be clear: people who feel drained aren't weak. They are simply directing their energy toward what doesn't nourish them. And what happens when you live this way? You become vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, manipulators move in. The world is full of people who intuitively sense your lack of boundaries. They see you overgiving, overreacting, over-explaining, and they exploit it, not with loud demands, but with subtle emotional hooks, the kind that make you feel obligated, guilty, ashamed of putting yourself first. Jung believed a healthy psyche doesn't leak energy. It contains it. It holds it within the system. That means knowing when to say no without apology, remaining silent not out of fear, but out of strength, observing rather than reacting. Because true personal power doesn't lie in how quickly you respond. It lies in your ability to choose if you respond at all. So how many nights have you lost sleep over someone else's emotional mess? How many hours have you wasted ruminating about what you should have said? How often do you replay conversations trying to make sense of someone else's poor behavior? All of this drains your life force. Emotional availability without discernment turns you into an emotional sponge, soaking up the projections, problems, and pain of others while leaving none of your energy for yourself. This is where we enter the emotional availability trap. When you're always accessible, you become a projection screen, a character in someone else's story. They don't relate to you. They relate to what they imagine you are: the comforter, the fixer, the listener. And why do you keep playing along? Because deep down, you fear the alternative, rejection, abandonment, being unloved. But what happens when you stop? When you begin saying no? When you reply with silence? When you set limits without offering a justification? The illusion collapses, the mask breaks. And now, the other person no longer knows who you are. That's terrifying for them, because they're forced to face themselves, and many aren't ready. That's when the criticism starts. The passive-aggressive comments, the emotional guilt trips, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped serving their comfort. Your silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they are confronted by their own emptiness. Jung famously said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your withdrawal reveals their shadow, the parts they've never wanted to face, and when you stop reacting, they have no choice but to sit with that discomfort. But here's the question you must face now. Are you willing to be misunderstood, misjudged, even abandoned, just to protect your energy? Are you willing to stop dancing for a crowd that only applauds when you perform your pain? Because that's where your true power lies, not in the performance, but in the pause, in the silence, in the restraint. And that's what we're about to dive into next. In the final part of this journey, we'll explore why silence, when rooted in self-knowledge and conscious choice, is the most devastatingly powerful force in the human psyche. It not only protects your energy, but completely disrupts the manipulative dynamics you've been trapped in. When you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. The modern world never stops talking. It buzzes, shouts, debates, argues. Everyone's trying to be the loudest in the room, desperate to be heard, to be right, to respond fast, even if it means trading their peace for a fleeting sense of superiority. But there is a different kind of power, one that is rarely recognized and even more rarely mastered. It's not dominance, not persuasion. It is silence. But not the silence of defeat or avoidance, not the silence of fear. This is conscious silence, strategic silence, the kind of silence that slices through noise with brutal clarity. It's not emptiness, it's amplified presence, it's stillness with intention, and in that stillness lies your deepest strength. Carl Jung didn't see silence as passive, he saw it as protective, transformative, a psychological weapon, because the moment you stop reacting, you start perceiving. You begin noticing what once slipped by unnoticed, the subtle loops of emotional manipulation, the patterns of self-betrayal, the ways you were being played. In the silence you start seeing, and that clarity, it threatens those who depend on your confusion to control you. Have you noticed how unsettled some people get when you simply don't respond? When you refuse to explain yourself? When you disappear, not in drama, but in quiet? Decisiveness. Their discomfort isn't about missing you. It's about losing the ability to shape the narrative. As long as you're explaining, defending, arguing, they are still in control. But when you go quiet, the rules shift. The entire game changes, and they can't play without your reactions. True silence isn't about withholding words. It's about reclaiming your energy. It's the refusal to be emotionally hijacked. It's the conscious choice to walk away from battles that drain rather than elevate. Jung believed that the process of becoming your truest self, individuation, requires a kind of sacred distance, because only in silence can you hear your own voice, distinct from the noise of expectations and projections. But let's not romanticize it. Silence comes at a cost. When you stop reacting, some people will pull away, not because you wronged them, but because they were only ever invested in your role, not your reality. Your silence will confuse them, irritate them, offend them, because what they saw in you was a mirror for their needs, not a person with boundaries. The deeper you go into yourself, the more selective you become with your words. You begin to understand that each word carries weight. Each sentence is a transaction of your energy, and not everyone deserves access to your internal economy. Silence becomes more than a tool. It becomes your shield. Sometimes it's not retreat, it's sovereignty. And that kind of silence, it makes people squirm. Why? Because it turns the mirror around. It forces them to sit with their own unprocessed noise, their own fears, their own projections, and in that uncomfortable space, your absence becomes louder than any explanation ever could. You don't need to explain why you're no longer available. Your silence explains itself, and those who feel shaken by it are revealing more than they realize. They're showing you just how much they depended on your emotional instability to feel in control of their own. Jung spoke of projections, the parts of ourselves we cannot face, so we project them onto others. Silence interrupts that mechanism. When you stop reacting, stop responding, the projection has nowhere to land. And that can be terrifying for those who need you to play a role in their unconscious script. The silence that wounds is not always cruel. Sometimes it's just clarity with boundaries. But the most potent silence is not the one that unsettles others. It's the one that rebuilds you. It's the silence that opens the door to your own essence. That brings you back to the parts of yourself you had forgotten while trying to be everything for everyone. In that quiet, something sacred begins to emerge, your vital energy, the very core of who you are, slowly untangled from the chaos around you. This is why Jung saw silence as essential to the psyche's evolution. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's necessary. It's the crucible where you stop being reactive and start becoming intentional, where you reclaim your energy from the hands of those who never earned it. But here's what no one tells you. Silence isn't simply the absence of sound. It is the refusal to give your energy away to what does not honor it. It's the space where you no longer feel the need to defend your decisions, your boundaries, your truth. Because the more you evolve, the more you realize some people only stay close as long as you keep sacrificing your peace for their comfort. The moment that stops, the silence begins, and many can't handle what it reflects. Silence, in its highest form, is psychological self-possession. It's your ability to observe rather than absorb, to notice patterns rather than become them. It's the language of someone who doesn't chase being understood because they've finally understood themselves. And that is frightening to anyone who benefited from your confusion. You will be called cold, distant, arrogant, detached, but these are just the labels the reactive give to the non-reactive, to the sovereign, because silence removes their ability to pull you into their chaos. And now they have to face themselves. As Jung taught, we do not find enlightenment by clinging to light alone. We find it by making the darkness conscious. And silence, it is the flashlight in the dark. It reveals shadows. It dissolves illusions. It brings you face to face with your own unconscious motives and the motives of others. And that's what makes it such a potent weapon. It can't be argued with. It can't be twisted. It can't be manipulated. Your silence cannot be used against you because it gives nothing away. It's not enough to simply silence the outer world. You must learn to listen to your inner world consciously, to direct your energy, to decide where it flows, where it stays, and most importantly, where it must never go again. This is where your transformation truly begins. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into this inner realignment, how to reclaim your energy, restructure your presence, and rebuild your life around discernment instead of emotional reaction, because it's time to stop being emotionally available to everyone and start becoming radically available to yourself. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who understand the power of their silence. Understanding things intellectually is only the beginning. Knowing the truth means little if in real life you're still saying yes when every part of you means no, still replying to messages that drain you, still keeping up with conversations that leave you empty, still holding on to relationships that exist not out of love but out of habit. Awareness without aligned action becomes another form of self-sabotage. You're not confused. You're avoiding the consequences of choosing yourself. Real transformation doesn't come with knowing more. It begins when you decide deeply, firmly to become selective. And make no mistake, this kind of selection requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not about arrogance or emotional detachment. It's not about being cold, closed off, or unkind. It's about no longer allowing yourself to be accessible 24/7 to everyone, for everything. It's about reclaiming authority over your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, and refusing to hand that power over out of guilt or obligation. And this shift doesn't begin with grand gestures. It starts in the smallest of ways. Not responding right away, taking a breath before you react, exiting a conversation before it turns toxic, turning off your phone, and not apologizing for it. And here's what most don't realize. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Your absence doesn't require justification. Your silence doesn't demand a backstory. You are not an emotional service provider. And when you stop explaining, you take away others' ability to trap you in a story where you are always the dependable one, always the caretaker, always available for their needs. Carl Jung understood something powerful. Every path of individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires a phase of sacred separation. But this isn't loneliness in the conventional sense. This isn't depression. This is solitude by choice, a retreat from the external world, so you can hear your own voice clearly again, without the background noise of other people's expectations. You stop being who the world trained you to be, and you start becoming who you really are. Want to know how far you've evolved? Just watch what happens when you become less reactive, less available, less willing to play the role you once filled. See who starts to pull away. See who gets frustrated, who calls you selfish, who tries to provoke you. These aren't signs that you're going in the wrong direction. These are signs that you're finally breaking the patterns that kept you small. And yes, at first, this new unavailability will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel the pull of guilt. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you're being too distant, too harsh. But understand, this discomfort isn't a warning, it's withdrawal. You're detoxing from a lifetime of putting others before yourself. Jung said we wear masks, personas, that help us fit into society, but healing means learning to remove those masks. And conscious unavailability is one of the ways we do that. It's not punishment, it's self-preservation. When you start saying no to what depletes you, you begin to say yes to your soul. When you walk away from what drains you, you're not abandoning others, you're honoring yourself. And when you stop offering constant access to your energy, people will start to respect it, even if only from a distance. But here's the paradox. Not everyone wants the real you. They want the version of you that's useful to them. And when you change, when you withdraw, when you stop playing that role, they won't know what to do with you. Some will leave, others will lash out, but this is not loss, it is liberation. And as you walk further down this path, you'll begin to see the truth. Not everyone deserves your presence. Not everyone is meant to sit at your table, and your emotional availability is not an obligation. It's a gift, a sacred one. This, Jung would say, is the beginning of self-possession. And yes, it will bring rupture. It will bring silence, the kind of silence that echoes in your chest at night. You'll wonder, did I push too far? Did I lose someone I care about? Am I alone? But slowly, that silence becomes something else. It becomes peace. It becomes clarity. It becomes strength. You'll begin to notice that this silence is not empty. It's full of you. It's the sound of your soul recalibrating. The solitude you once feared becomes the very place where your power regenerates. Carl Jung once said that to truly individuate, you must walk away from the collective, from the masks, from the noise, and begin again from the center of your being. That's what you're doing when you become unavailable. Not to punish the world, but to reconnect with your essence. This is where you stop being a responder and start becoming a creator. This is when you begin shaping your life. not around who needs you, but around what nourishes you. And yes, people will talk. They'll say you've changed, that you've become selfish, distant, cold, but all they're really saying is that you've stopped betraying yourself for their comfort. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. You were never meant to shrink in order to be loved. You were meant to expand in order to be free. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will walk away from certain spaces, but you will reclaim your space in the world. You will be misunderstood, but in time, you will be respected. Because when you stop being available for anything, you become valuable for what matters. And let's be clear, this is not an end. This is a rebirth. It's the beginning of a life where you are no longer accessible for emotional scraps, fake connections, or roles that diminish your truth. You no longer chase affection that costs your peace. You only accept what aligns with your integrity, with your calm, with your inner wholeness. If you've made it to this point, it's because some part of you is already ready. You've already felt it, this pull toward sovereignty, toward truth, toward choosing yourself, even if it means standing alone for a season. So let me ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood, even rejected, in the name of your freedom? If this message touched you, if it reflected something you've been feeling deep down, then leave a comment below and write, "I choose my peace." Let's see how many here are walking this sacred path of self-reclamation. And don't stop now. The next video continues this journey. We'll talk about how to build your life from this new energy, how to become emotionally sovereign, spiritually grounded, and powerfully present. This isn't just about walking away. It's about walking toward the life you were always meant to live. I'll see you there.